notes that I'm going to assign you in the report, and particularly the briefs, because you can find these online, but I expect these briefs to be original. I expect your own writing in the briefs. The only unoriginal material that should be quoted is the language itself from the opinion, the court opinion that you are analyzing for the brief. If you're going to use the language, quote it so I know where it's coming from. If it's not the exact language, but it's coming from the opinion, the Supreme Court identified this is Supreme Court language, so I'm clear where that's coming from. Any other language that does not come from the court and does not come from your own research should be either sourced by attributing the idea to where you got the idea, or if it's the language is specific to that source, also quotes should be used. Plagiarism is something that you don't want to fall into, and that can happen on these briefs because, believe me, they're prevalent out there, and unfortunately it's readily apparent when these briefs are professionally done or done by a variety of commercial services or individuals who are offering them. And that's oftentimes is because they're so poorly done, they're so inadequately written. They're so brief, they're not what I'm looking for. I want, and you'll have the prescribed format is in the information section or the document section. I'm sorry, it's in the document section of Blackboard, and that's titled researching, researching, briefing, and citing Supreme Court cases. You'll see it in there. We'll talk about this later anyway. No credit for the course though, so you want to make sure these briefs are definitely your own work. It's not worth it by taking a shortcut on this stuff. The prohibited conduct for the course, this is an online course, but restrict your comments to material from the course, and also make sure that sometimes you have some heated discussion, but keep it respectful. Remember, respect the other students' opinions, and I expect vigorous advocacy for your own opinions, but that doesn't mean you should be denigrating or ridiculing or getting angry with students who have opinions that are different from yours. The main thing I want to see, though, if you have opinions about these particular issues or cases in the discussion forum, support them with sound legal opinions, sound peer-reviewed journal articles. I don't want to see anything from, well, this is how I just feel about it, or I saw it on TV, or I heard some commentator remark on something. Because believe me, most of that stuff that you're going to see on TV is often highly erroneous and politically slanted. Okay, that should do it with the basic, your basic syllabus, and we're going to return back to the foundations or the formulation of the court, and brief history lesson that relates very strongly to the first 10 amendments, or at least the first 8. And the reasoning behind those amendments, again, was that the delegates to the Constitutional Convention and later during the ratification process, when there was debates within the states, they were very concerned with the violations of their civil liberties that occurred during the pre-revolution times and in the United States, in the colonies, and during the Revolution. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, the first thing you should do, read the Declaration of Independence. Find it, it's online. This is tough. Find it online. when you read the Declaration of Independence, you're going to see a list of all the problems, all the disagreements that we had with England and King George, the Parliament. It's a listing of things that had happened to the colonialists, and you can understand the anger that they had. Now, they also had, there was also a lot of self-interest, just like any dispute. The colonialists also had reasons that they wanted less restrictions from Great Britain because of profit, monetary profits that were involved in this. But in many circumstances, Great Britain went far overreached in this area and really restricted liberties to the point that we never forgot it as a country. And we ensured that these particular aspects of our civil life and the liberties that we expect in our country are never going to be restricted by a government, including our own. So remember this about the amendments. And I often see students get confused about this as to whether or not an individual can restrict your rights under your constitutional rights. They can't. They cannot unless they're an agent of the government. The government can restrict under the Constitution. Your rights are only restricted by the government, and that essentially means it's agents. In most cases, this will end up being the police because they're the agent of the government. Their job is to bring security and peace, but in doing that, there are times in which they may infringe upon your individual liberties. The other areas in which this will happen are the laws that are passed by state and federal governments, in which they, again, in many of these cases, are looking at security or peacekeeping roles. But they may go too far. So when we look at these amendments, realize that they were based initially on what had happened to us by the British, and we did not want to see it happening again. Why did the British do this to us? Well, mainly because they always viewed us as a way to make money. It was a mercantilist system. They took from us, they manufactured it and sold it back to us. Remember the original colonies, they were all coastal. They had governments, they had charters and contracts. These served as actually forerunners to the constitutions. They often had a religious basis that also had influence on our government. If we look at the eastern, especially let's say the Massachusetts colony, which was a religious-based charter, and by the Puritans. They in fact had a government that was based on religion. The laws were it was basically almost a theocracy. That wasn't the case in all the colonies, but generally what we see there is each colony setting up their own government. But Great Britain sent a governor that was appointed. He was a royal governor. So even though we had our own government set up, there still was oversight by the British government. And one of the problems that came up with us in Great Britain was the idea that although the laws that they were passed in Britain were imposed on us, we did not have representation. Members of the colonies did not have a vote in Parliament. They had power in their own colony, but laws were imposed by England were the law of the land. They were enforced by the governor, who was also either from Great Britain or someone appointed by the British, and that created a great deal of friction. The other thing that happened was the French and Indian War. Remember the French and Indian War, the French and the British were basically striving for dominion over America. It's what their version of America at the time, which included the colonies. Long battle. It also was fought in Europe on the seas. But the French and Indian War was lost by the French. The British over here during the French and Indian War, we had British troops that helped protect us against the French and the Indians, who were often Confederates of the French. The British spent a lot of money on this, and it also, the whole French and Indian War, the battle with the French, not just the French and Indian War, but the battle between Britain and France, over who was the global power, that caused a great deal of loss of, it caused a shortage of money. So one of the ways that the Parliament decided to gain some money back was to tax the colonies heavier, and they viewed this as correct because they saw the British as spending money to protect the colonists. And now they wanted to get some of that money back, and they did this by passing taxes. We hated taxes. They passed taxes, we hated the taxes, and that caused some issues with us. And we didn't have representation. We didn't like the taxes. We wanted control of our domestic affairs. We set up our own Continental Congress. We sent letters to the Parliament, King George, objecting to this. That ended up inflaming British sensibilities. So they had debates over in Great Britain over whether or not how much freedom we should be given, how our rights should be respected or should not be respected. But it ended up with us becoming, basically more concerned over this. We formed militias, and then in 1775, we actually had a battle at Lexington and Concord with British soldiers, in which around over 90 colonialists were killed. That was a major problem for us, and that was something that at that point you could say that there was no turning back. And we created the Second Continental Congress, and we decided on something that really struck at the heart of Great Britain, a non-importation law. We basically would not import things from Great Britain that they made for us. We were going to make these things ourselves. Well, the whole system of mercantilism which they were operating under was that they took resources from us, but they made things in Great Britain and they sold them to us. Now we're not buying them, we're making them. We're making our own clothes. We're not buying the actually better made British clothes. We were making the homespun stuff. But that was really affecting them economically. Well, now we're attacking an economic system that they relied upon. So it was very hard for them also to back down at this stage. In 1775, we had the Battle of Bunker Hill. In that battle, we had a much better system. We had a better result. We lost, but there were around 1,000 British soldiers killed in that battle. And at that point, that loss of life, remember that was 1775, George Washington was appointed as the head of the army. Now we have an army. We've killed a lot of British soldiers. And 1776, basically John Adams, Thomas Jefferson being the main drafter, many of the ideas from Adams and Jefferson, and some other individuals, including Benjamin Franklin. We have the Declaration, we formulate the Declaration of Independence, which we lay out our grievances. We send it to Parliament. We tell them what we are, and we basically declare independence. We're now individual states. We've had enough from you. We're on our own, and we're going to continue fighting. That Declaration of Independence started our battle. It was effective, and we won, but the way we governed, the way we operated during the Revolutionary War and after, we realized that at least some of the more influential people in the new states realized that we needed to have a better form, a governmental system, if we were going to be able to survive on the world stage. because we would certainly be prone to having disputes with other countries. And we needed to be able to defend ourselves better. And to do that, we needed obviously a stronger government. And that was the dispute. There were especially more of the rural areas of the new states. They were very opposed to a stronger federal government. The major cities wanted a stronger government. They saw this as economics. There was the division between the farming, the planning class, and the industrialists, the money people, the financiers who saw us as a world player. And this actually is carried over to today in some cases. You still see kind of the division between a more of a state sovereignty issue of more of the rural areas versus the cities often being more towards a national system. You often see the national government dealing with the city governments and with the remainder of the non-city aspects of the states. So it's still an issue. The idea is who's going to be who should have the power, who should be more powerful, the federal government or the state governments. Inevitably, the federal government, because of the integration of the world today, the globalization of the structure, the national government is a bigger footprint in the life of the overall United States. But when we get down to an individual's life, oftentimes we do have a lot more contact with local and state governments, except in certain issues in which constitutional principles become apparent to us when we feel that our own state is impinging upon our liberties. So we had, that's kind of the background of how we developed our Constitution. But let me sum up here some key principles. The Constitution, the major reason behind it, the way it was formulated, was to prevent the concentration of power. They did not want to have one segment of that government become so powerful that they could become tyrannical. They wanted checks and balances, so they did not want concentration, and that included the balance with state governments. So the drafters of the Constitution envisioned this, that these powers would be split. And you can see this when you look at this. You look at the Constitution. All right, guys.
Battery out. Battery
I should have gotten those batteries.
No, there's a battery. No, I have an adapter, but I didn't have a plug here. I just started there.